So in the past, I blasted Oracle for having enclosures that were annoyingly loud. So to combat that, I thought they would just come out with an enclosure with a quieter fan. But they decided to take it one step further. They decided to remove the fan completely. Now this should be interesting. YouTube, welcome to GeekShhh. So today, we're taking a look at the Thunderbolt 5 80 gigabits per second Enclosure X50 from Orico. Now, full disclosure, I was sent this unit for review. However, Orico would not see my review before it goes live on my channel, and I also would not cater my opinions to suit their needs. So in the box, we have the unit itself, a screw, a 17-inch cable from end to end, a screwdriver, a thermal pad, and a manual. Now back to the unit itself. Now the enclosure itself feels pretty sturdy in the hand, made out of aluminum alloy with a mesh-like top and a rigid metal bottom to help accelerate that heat dissipation. Coming in at less than 2.5 inches from top to bottom, a little over 4 inches from side to side, and less than 1 inch in width, and weighing in at about 190 grams, which equates to 0.43 pounds. So let's go ahead and open up the enclosure and populate it with a WD SN850X, which has since quadrupled in price since I purchased it last year, but I digress. Then we're gonna go ahead and lay that thermal pad on top of it, close it back up, attach the USB 4 V2 cable, and let's go ahead and head to the desktop. Now I'm gonna go ahead and format my drive real quick, utilizing this utility. Now we're gonna go ahead and do a 1 gig Blackmagic disk speed test. Then we're gonna switch to a 5 gig test. And as you can see, now we are getting very close to that 6,000 megabytes per second. Also, here's the results of the amorphous disk mark test. Now, it is not recommended by Orico to use a PCIe 5.0 drive such as the Samsung 9100 Pro, but it will indeed still work. Let's go ahead and do some speed tests. Now, for a 1 gig test, you're looking at close to 6,400 megabytes per second in write and close to 6,000 megabytes per second in read. And also the 5 gig test will render you the same results. So the reason they're telling you not to use a PCIe 5.0 drive that can go all the way up to 14,000 megabytes per second is because you're handicapped by the maximum speed allowed by your Thunderbolt 5 port in back of your M4 Mac Mini Pro. Now, as the amorphous disk mark test runs, we can take time to see how this enclosure is shown under macOS system information under the hardware section. It is shown as USB 4 V2, which is basically the same as Thunderbolt 5 because it allows you to utilize the maximum speed allowed by your Thunderbolt 5 port, which is 80 gigabits per second, which technically should allow you to go all the way up to 8,000 megabytes per second. But realistically in macOS, you're only going to be around that 6,000 megabytes per second range. All right, guys, so what we're going to do now is go ahead and stress out the SN850X drive, the external drive. So right up here, we have activity monitor. That will basically let you know the speed of the data written and the data read. Right here, we have the Finder window, and this is going to be the folder that we'll be transferring to the desktop and from the desktop back over to the external drive so we can test, so we can stress the drive out. This is a 706 gig folder. Back here, we have max fan control, so you can see the speed of the fan in the M4 Mac Mini Pro. It's not that serious. That's not important at all. Down here, you have the internal temperature of the internal drive of my M4 Mac Mini. Right here, you have just a timer so we can see how long it takes. Up here, you just have the information about the computer, the M4 Mac Mini Pro. Right here, you have Smart Mon tools. This is very important. This is what we're going to be using to get the temperature of real-time temperature of the external drive. So I'm going to be refreshing it about every 10 seconds so we can get the temperature of the external drive. Now, why I like using Smart Mon tools, which is something that's inside the terminal, which I have set up inside the terminal on macOS, is because it lets you know the specs of the drive that you're using. For instance, I'm at a warning state once I get to 90 degrees Celsius. I'm at a critical state once I get to 94 degrees Celsius. So as long as I'm at 89 degrees Celsius or lower, we're good. And I think it's important to say that because some people think once their drive get to 75 degrees Celsius, that it's quote unquote burning up. No, it's not. So we're going to go ahead and get this started. Also, I'm going to be checking in on the temperature of the actual enclosure. As you can see right now, the ambient temperature in the office that I'm at is 77 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 25 degrees Celsius. And the drive right now, the enclosure right now at the top is 33 degrees Celsius. And underneath it is also 33 degrees Celsius. So it's pretty cool right now. All right, so let's go ahead and get things started. I'm gonna go ahead and send this folder over from the external drive over to the desktop, and from the desk. Oh man, what I'm doing? Did I do something? Oh, okay, all right, cool. Drop it over to the desktop, get this started. All right, up here, as you can see. All right, so we sending it over, and I'm just gonna refresh it at 10 seconds. All right, as you can see, it jumped up to 46 degrees Celsius. So I'm just go ahead and keep doing that and fast forward you guys through. Perfect. All right, so it kept it at 54 degrees Celsius. So what we're going to do now is send that folder back over to the external drive and continue on. All right, so it kept it at 62 degrees or lower, max 62 degrees of the internal drive. And also, I believe the enclosure got up to like 45 degrees Celsius on the bottom. Let me check again. 48 degrees at the bottom. That is pretty impressive, guys. So what do I think about this enclosure after months of use? I think it's the best 80 gigabit per second enclosure on the market. The ability to push the NVMe drive to that 6,000 megabytes per second range without a fan is truly mind-blowing to me. And from what I've seen, this is only one of two enclosures on the market that can actually do it. And this is the more compact design of the two. Now, personally, I don't mind having fan noise as long as I could describe it as a light breeze rather than annoyingly loud. But make no mistakes about it. If I have a choice, then I prefer dead silence, especially when I'm getting the same or better performance than the ones that come with that fan noise. Now, I have a 40 gigabit per second enclosure that I've been using for a year or two with my M1 MacBook Pro, and is also fanless, but fully metal. Now, when it's in use, it gets very hot, and you definitely do not want to touch it for long because it feels like your fingers are about to burn. But I do not get that same effect with the X50 enclosure because Orico removed the metal top and replaced it with mesh, covering a cooling pad that they describe as vapor gel that keeps the top cooler than the metal parts. Combine that with the bottom having a rigid design that constantly helps dissipate heat, then you have an enclosure that you don't feel like will burn you if you handle it while in use. That's how they was able to keep it more compact than its competition, as well as giving you the same results. Also, if you go back and watch the stress test portion of any drive in any of my 80 gigabit per second enclosures on my channel, you will see that this fanless enclosure actually kept the drives cooler during those stress tests, believe it or not. Now, it's not all peaches and cream. There is one problem that I have with this enclosure, and that's when I go to switch drives. You remember we place a thermal pad onto the NVMe drive, and then we squish it against the metal on the bottom. Well, that sticky thermal pad causes the bottom to get stuck and becomes very hard to remove. I end up using an iFixit Jimmy that I have to pry it open. Other than that, I'm rating this hands down a 10 out of 10 from Orico. Very genius design, and it's extremely underrated. Now, last but not least, let's discuss disconnects. If you go into any comment section of any hub, docking station, or enclosure, you will see someone commenting about disconnect issues. Let's talk about what can actually cause those. In the back of your M4 Mac Mini, you have Thunderbolt ports, obviously. Unfortunately, Apple never told us how many watts each port can provide. And what we have learned is that what you plug into one port can impede on the performance of what's plugged into the other two ports, which can easily cause those disconnects. This is why a lot of hubs and docking stations come with their own power brick to stop that impedance altogether. Also, let's talk about Spotlight. Spotlight Search is a utility on macOS that indexes all your files on both your internal as well as your external drive so that you can easily find them in your search. Now, this can also add a lot of stress to your drive and may also lead to disconnects. To stop this from happening, just go to System Settings, Spotlight, and then Privacy, and then add your external drive. Also, you can go to Terminal and add the command that I have in the description to stop Spotlight from indexing the files on your external drive altogether. Now, I've been using this enclosure since November and never experienced not one disconnect. But if you have on this or any other enclosure, then you might want to look into what we just discussed. My name is DeMarco Payne for GeekShhh. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And last but not least, may the good news be yours.